Analysis on this now from Enes Bayrakli, who joins me from here in Istanbul. He's an associate professor of political science at the Turkish-German University. Thank you so much for joining us on the program once again. Now, it doesn't seem like Russia is open to changing its terms, especially now that we're hearing the leaders of the self-proclaimed Luhansk Republic call for a referendum in joining Russian soil. If they do end up redefining borders, how would that change things geopolitically?
I think this is already happening. I mean, this has happened before. There is a president here. Crimea was occupied first and then annexed by Russia. And the lack of reaction by West, I think, has encouraged Russia to continue with this policy. And I think, unfortunately, Donbas region is the next. And Russia will annex those regions in the coming months, and I think that will be also part of negotiations and the part of the agreement between Ukraine and Russia. And already Zelensky has agreed or has made it official that he is ready to discuss the Donbas issue with Russia.
Turkey is, of course, playing an important role here in mediating the crisis. How can Turkey's efforts help the two sides come to terms?
I think Turkey has a unique position here, and both our allies in the West, also Russia and Ukraine, they do acknowledge the Turkey's position, and Turkey can facilitate a peace deal between Russia and the Ukraine. And these efforts, I think they are also very much appreciated by all actors. That's why all these negotiations are happening in Istanbul now. Of course, there won't be a quick solution to this problem, but this is only the beginning of this process, and we will see more negotiations, more of these negotiations in Istanbul, I think, in the coming weeks.
Ahead of these negotiations, we heard Zelensky express his willingness to talk on the neutrality of Ukraine, but only if they have security guarantees as well. What would those security guarantees look like?
I think what Ukraine asks is the security guarantees from United Nations Security Council members, plus Turkey, Germany, and Italy. So these countries will be the guarantors of a Ukraine territory and Ukrainian independence. Of course, and then Ukraine will be a neutral country, like Austria. As you know, Austria is also a neutral country after the Second World War. And Austria is not part of NATO, but Austria has joined the European Union. So there is a possibility that Russia also may accept that Ukraine stays out of military alliances, but in the future may join the European Union. So there are also some indications of this coming from Russia, so statements. But of course, this is only the beginning of all these negotiations. It's a very complex, I think it will be a very complex deal between Russia and Ukraine. And of course, Ukraine is not alone in this. It has the backing of the Western powers, and they have to also agree on these terms.
Right, and during previous negotiations, we did see the two sides come to an agreement in opening humanitarian corridors so people that are trapped in areas that are under heavy bombardment could leave the country. And we are seeing a refugee crisis unfold in this current time, as millions and millions of people have been displaced and have fled into neighboring countries. On that front, what does the international community need to do to avert a bigger refugee crisis and to avert from this crisis to get out of hand, like what we saw happen with Syria?
I think it's inevitable. It cannot be stopped now. It all depends on a ceasefire. Without a ceasefire, more and more refugees will move. They will be moving to Europe, but also there are millions of internally displaced people inside Ukraine. So unfortunately, this is a byproduct of this war, and this is inevitable. But the humanitarian corridors are really a must. There has to be an agreement between Russia and Ukraine, especially Mariupol. There are thousands of civilians trapped in Mariupol, and they have to leave the Mariupol as soon as possible. But unfortunately, we also see from Russian history, they are not really very much concerned about, civilians. We have seen this time and again in Aleppo, in Syria, in Grozny, in Chechnya. So unfortunately, this is the tradition of the Russians. So, but I think there has to be more pressure on the Russian side to open this corridor. And also, I think Turkey can play a big role in here, and Turkey's good relations with Russia, and especially President Erdogan's relation with President Putin. Maybe President Erdogan can convince President Putin to open this humanitarian corridor, at least to to save more lives, especially from Mariupol.
Right, and speaking of President Putin, he's under increasing pressure from his own people within Russia to stop his incursion into Ukraine and bring an end to this conflict. Do you think that at one stage, with the sanctions that have been imposed on Russia and the increasing pressure that he's facing from his people across his country, that he will end up giving in and bring an end to this conflict, even if we don't see any progress happen within today's negotiations?
I think in the short term, President Putin can manage all these problems, but in the midterm and the long term, he will have lots of problems, especially the economic impact of all these sanctions and the casualties of the war. Russia has lost thousands of soldiers in Ukraine. The exact numbers are not known, but I think in the midterm and the long term, we will see more and more problems in Russia. And but in the short term, I think Mr. Putin can manage all these problems because he has been running the country for about 20 years now. So he's a very powerful political actor in Russia.
All right, Enes Bayrakli, thank you so much for joining us once again here on TRT World and sharing that insight with us.